There's a quiet extinction happening, not of animals, not of languages, but of something far more invisible, far more dangerous. The real man. Not the macho caricature on magazine covers, not the loud performative alpha obsessed with dominance, but the man who is whole, psychologically, spiritually, internally. The kind of man who has stared into his own abyss and didn't look away. He's vanishing, and nobody seems to notice. In a world obsessed with progress, men are regressing, anxious, addicted, directionless, drowning in a sea of distractions and dopamine, raised by women, educated by institutions, and softened by systems that reward obedience, not growth. What's left is a generation of males stuck in perpetual adolescence, craving validation but fearing confrontation, appearing strong but collapsing under pressure. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and philosopher, warned us of this. He didn't just study the psyche, he mapped it. He spoke of the shadow, the animus, and the eternal struggle between the persona we wear and the beast we hide. He believed that becoming a real man meant confronting this beast, embracing discomfort, facing truth, and walking the terrifying path toward individuation. But modern society has removed that path. It has replaced trial with comfort, depth with image, meaning with consumption. Boys are not challenged. They are sedated. They are sold ideals they can never live up to, and never taught how to live with themselves. So they vanish, not physically, but psychically. Present in body, absent in spirit, dead behind the eyes, disconnected from the warrior within, and that's no accident, because a real man is dangerous, not violent, but unshakable. A real man cannot be manipulated with shame. He cannot be controlled. With fear, he thinks for himself. He chooses his battles. He walks alone, not to escape others, but to find himself. This video is not a complaint. It's not a nostalgia trip. It's a psychological autopsy, a deep dive into the silent epidemic of spiritual castration. And more importantly, it's a blueprint for resurrection. Every man begins as a boy, but not every boy becomes a man. And the bridge in between, the one that once connected them, is collapsing. For centuries, young men were initiated. Tribes had rituals. Wars had lessons. Fathers had wisdom. There was a fire every boy had to walk through, a necessary trial, to transform weakness into strength and fear into courage. It wasn't safe. It wasn't easy. But it was sacred. Today, that fire is gone. And with it, so are the fathers who once lit it. We live in a fatherless age, not just biologically, but symbolically. Even when fathers are physically present, they're often psychologically absent, silent, distracted, overworked, or emotionally distant. They can't teach what they were never taught. And so, the legacy of absence continues. Carl Jung believed, the father represents more than a biological role. He symbolizes structure, discipline, and the guiding principle of conscious will. Without the father archetype, a boy is lost in a sea of impulses, ruled by emotion, ego, and fantasy. He becomes reactive instead of reflective, compliant instead of courageous. Worse, in the void left behind, society steps in, not to guide him, but to tame him. Modern culture doesn't initiate men, it domesticates them. It shames aggression, pathologizes ambition, mocks stoicism, rewards comfort. And so, boys grow into men with soft hands and brittle spirits, outwardly harmless, inwardly hollow. They become what Jung called the purs aeternus and the eternal adolescent, terrified of responsibility, addicted to novelty, and secretly longing for a father they never had, and that father doesn't have to be flesh and blood. Sometimes it's an ideal, a voice of inner authority, the version of yourself you haven't become yet but still might, if only you stopped running. But no one teaches boys how to find that voice. Instead, we raise them in systems that punish independence and reward submission. We educate them like factory workers. We medicate their energy. We sterilize their instincts. And then we wonder why they're angry, lost, and broken. Jung said, The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents. A boy raised by a broken man inherits more than trauma. He inherits emptiness. The result? Men with no direction, men with no identity. Men who chase women, wealth, and power, not out of desire, but desperation. Not because they are full, but because they are empty. They're not bad, they're just uninitiated, and they're looking for fire. The question is, who will give it to them? Every man has two faces, the one he shows the world, the mask, and the one he hides in the dark, the shadow. Carl Jung didn't invent the shadow, but he gave it a name. He believed every human being carries a buried side, the repressed, the denied, the unacceptable. It holds our rage, our lust, our envy, our cruelty. It's everything we've been told is not okay. Everything we hide to be loved, accepted, safe. For men, the shadow is especially volatile because our culture doesn't teach boys how to channel it. It teaches them to deny it. Don't cry. Don't get angry. Don't feel too much. Don't want too much. Don't be too loud, too quiet, too proud, too ambitious. So what happens to those emotions? They don't disappear. They descend. They live in the basement of the psyche, growing stronger, darker, and more twisted over time. Until one day, they explode. Violence, addiction, depression, or worse, quiet resignation. The shadow you refuse to face doesn't go away. It becomes you, without your awareness, without your permission. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Look around. You'll see the shadow everywhere. Not in the violent few, but in the passive many. The man who feels invisible. The man who smiles through gritted teeth. The man who hates himself, but doesn't know why. He's not evil. He's unintegrated. He's at war with himself, and no amount of money, sex, or success will fix that, because it's not about the world. It's about the wound. To become a real man, Jung believed you must turn inward and descend into your own darkness. You must meet the monster within. And instead of killing it, you must befriend it. That doesn't mean giving in to your worst impulses. It means understanding them. It means finding the gift in the wound, the wisdom behind the anger, the power behind the fear, the truth beneath the shame. A man who integrates his shadow is no longer a slave to it. He becomes whole. He can feel anger without being consumed. He can feel desire without being reckless. He can walk into conflict without collapsing, because he knows who he is. And yet, our culture offers no map for this journey, no rite of passage, no elders, no language. So most men never take it. Instead, they project their shadow onto others. They demonize women. They idolize tyrants. They cling to ideologies. They lash out at the world, when the real battle is inside. Jung warned, "The man who is unaware of his shadow becomes the puppet of history. Look at our institutions. Look at our politics. Look at our relationships. We're ruled by men who wear suits but never grew up. Men who speak like leaders but act like boys. Men who hide behind power because they're terrified of being seen. This isn't just psychology. It's prophecy. And unless we learn to face our shadow, as individuals and as a culture, we will repeat the same tragedies again and again. But here's the good news. Your shadow is not your enemy. It's your teacher, your gatekeeper, your test. To become a real man, you don't need to eliminate your darkness. You need to own it, and only then can you become something more. What if masculinity isn't toxic, but targeted? Today, the word masculine is treated like a threat, something to be tamed, sterilized, or apologized for. Boys are taught to sit still, be nice, blend in. Men are taught to suppress their instincts, or else they'll be labeled dangerous, arrogant, or outdated. But masculinity is not the enemy. It's the fire that built civilizations. It's the force that protected the tribe. It's the silent strength that stands between order and chaos. Carl Jung saw masculinity not as a stereotype, but a psychic energy, a force of structure, action, will, and purpose. Not superior, not inferior, but essential. And yet that force is under siege. From a young age, boys are surrounded by institutions that misunderstand them, schools that punish their energy, media that mocks their role, and systems that treat male traits as liabilities. Assertiveness becomes aggression. Ambition becomes ego. Stoicism becomes emotional repression. But what happens when a culture devalues masculine virtues? It doesn't disappear. It fractures. Men become either overly passive, afraid to speak, lead, or assert, or they overcompensate, becoming loud, reactive, and aggressive. Both are imbalanced. Both are lost. The truth is, real masculinity is not about dominance or submission. It's about integration. It's the ability to stand still in chaos, to protect without controlling, to lead without exploiting. But this version of masculinity doesn't serve the modern narrative, because a strong, grounded, self-possessed man can't be manipulated. He can't be shamed into silence. He can't be sold a fake identity. He doesn't need constant validation. He doesn't need to prove himself to the world, because he knows who he is. That kind of man is dangerous to systems that profit from insecurity. So instead, the world creates a man who's confused, always questioning his instincts, always doubting his place, always apologizing for his nature. Carl Jung called this a soul sickness, when a person lives in conflict with their own essence, and you can see it everywhere. Men drowning in addictions they can't explain. Men living in quiet desperation, stuck in jobs they hate, relationships they can't leave, routines they can't stand. Not because they're weak, but because their masculine soul has been starved. We've replaced initiation with indoctrination. Instead of encouraging men to conquer themselves, we teach them to conform. Instead of rites of passage, we offer passive consumption. Porn, video games, scrolling, anything to distract them from the inner hunger they can't name. But beneath all of that, the masculine soul still stirs. It remembers. It remembers the call to protect, to build, to endure, to transform. And no matter how loud the world gets, that call never dies. The question is, will you listen to it? Because reclaiming masculinity doesn't mean going backward. It doesn't mean mimicking outdated roles. It means returning to something timeless, something eternal. The masculine soul isn't toxic. It's untamed, and in a world trying to sedate you, the most radical thing a man can do is wake up. There was a time when the masculine spirit was not something to fear, but something to revere. The hero was sacred, not because he was perfect, but because he carried a burden no one else could. He protected, he provided, he suffered, in silence. He stood between chaos and order, between the tribe and the threat, between the weak and the wolf. He didn't beg for comfort. He didn't outsource his strength. He became it. This figure, the archetypal hero, once shaped entire civilizations. From Odysseus and Hercules to the knights of Arthurian legend, from warriors in ancient myth to modern soldiers and fathers who endured without applause. But in today's world, that hero is forgotten. Worse, he's mocked. He's called toxic, problematic, outdated. The same qualities that once defined noble masculinity, strength, courage, responsibility, have been repackaged as threats. And so, modern men are left with two options: be harmless or be hated. The result? A generation of men who don't know what they are, or what they're supposed to be. Carl Jung believed that without a guiding myth, a man's psyche fractures. He needs a story, a symbolic goal, to give his suffering meaning. Without it, pain becomes unbearable, and the soul begins to rot. That's what's happening today. Masculinity has been emptied of myth, stripped of depth and purpose. We reduce men to wallets, labor, or problems. We define their value by productivity. We shame their instincts and we leave them spiritually starved. No wonder so many men numb themselves with porn, with video games, with substances, with noise. They're not just distracted, they're disoriented because the hero inside them is still alive. But he's trapped in a world that offers no dragons to slay, no kingdoms to save, no purpose to pursue. Just screens, debt, compliance. Jung saw the hero as an essential phase in male individuation, the psychological journey to selfhood. Without this inner adventure, a man never becomes himself. He stays a boy in a man's body, waiting for someone else to tell him what to do, how to feel, and who to be. But the hero doesn't wait. He chooses. He walks into the unknown. He faces trials. He suffers losses. And through it all, he transforms. That is the essence of masculinity Jung spoke of. Not domination, not ego, but transcendence through struggle. The hero doesn't conquer the world. He conquers himself. And yet, there is no space for this truth in the mainstream narrative. We're taught to see masculinity as a threat to be managed, rather than a power to be matured. But when you strip a man of his heroic potential, you don't make him safer. You make him sicker, and deep down, every man knows this. That's why stories still matter. That's why ancient myths still resonate. That's why so many men feel a hunger they can't name, a longing for something they've never had. But somehow remember, that something is initiation, a call to rise, a path to walk, a dragon to face, a self to become. And it starts with remembering, you are not a machine. You are not a problem. You are not the villain of history. You are a forgotten hero. But you don't have to stay that way. Once men were taught to lead, now they're trained to comply. From the classroom to the office, from relationships to religion, there's a quiet but aggressive force reshaping the modern male. Passivity. It's not taught directly. It's engineered through systems that punish assertiveness and reward obedience. Sit down. Be quiet. Don't speak unless spoken to. Raise your hand for permission. Follow the rules. It starts young. In school, energy is medicated, curiosity is standardized, competition is shamed. A boy who questions too much is disruptive. A boy who challenges authority is aggressive. A boy who shows confidence is labeled arrogant, so he learns to suppress, to wait, to fold. By the time he becomes a man, he's a shell, trained to please, programmed to avoid risk. Emotionally, neutered, spiritually sedated. This isn't evolution. It's deconstruction, and it's not accidental. Passive men are easy to manage. They don't start revolutions. They don't resist injustice. They don't ask dangerous questions. They just exist. Quiet, compliant, tamed. Carl Jung warned that a man who loses his instincts becomes a domesticated animal, biologically alive but psychologically dead. And that's what many men have become. They're not bad. They're not weak. They're just asleep. They mistake politeness for virtue, comfort for happiness, safety for meaning. But beneath the surface, something simmers. A quiet resentment, a hunger, a sense that this isn't how it was supposed to be. You see it in the man who's constantly apologizing, the man who waits for permission to live, the man who gives everything and receives nothing, but never asks why. He doesn't explode. He erodes, bit by bit, day by day, until there's nothing left of him but routines, obligations, and buried dreams. This isn't about going backward. It's not about rage or rebellion. It's about reclamation, the reclamation of inner authority. Because leadership isn't about controlling others. It's about mastering yourself. It's about knowing what you stand for, what you'll fight for, what you'll walk away from, even when it costs you everything. But this kind of man threatens the system. because he can't be bought, he can't be bribed, he can't be broken. So instead of cultivating him, the system conditions the opposite. Men who are passive, pleasant, predictable. But here's the tragedy. Even the most passive man knows, in his bones, that he was made for more, that there is something noble about risk, something beautiful in standing alone, something sacred in walking your own path, even when no one claps for you. Jung believed that the path to individuation, becoming a true self, demands tension, conflict, and confrontation. And the modern world has removed all three. In doing so, it's removed the man. So if you feel numb, if you feel like life is happening to you, if you feel like you're watching yourself from a distance, it's not because you're broken, it's because you've been tamed. And maybe it's time to wake up. Every few minutes, a man takes his own life. He doesn't leave a manifesto. No protest, no explanation, just silence. To the outside world, it seems like a mystery. He had a job, a family, a routine, no visible wounds. But inside, he was drowning, and no one noticed, and because men are taught to sink quietly. We call it depression. But Carl Jung had a different word for it. A calling. To Jung, depression wasn't just a condition. It was a message, from the deepest part of the self, that something vital had been lost. A man who's depressed isn't always chemically imbalanced. He's spiritually starved. He's exhausted from pretending. He's ashamed for feeling. He's terrified of admitting what he truly wants. So instead of screaming, he shuts down. Instead of running, he withdraws. Instead of rebelling, he collapses. We live in a culture that encourages men to suppress everything. Their anger, their ambition, their sadness, even their hope. They're told that to feel deeply is weakness, that suffering makes them broken, that asking for more is selfish. But Jung knew better. He saw depression as the soul's revolt against a life that lacks meaning. It's the psyche saying, "This path isn't yours. Turn around. Find what you lost." The modern man is depressed, not because he's too emotional, but because he's not allowed to feel enough. He's isolated, disconnected, atomized. No initiation, no brotherhood, no elder guidance. He has friends, but they don't go deep. He has family, but no soul connection. He has goals, but no vision. He's surrounded by people and yet completely alone. And then he's blamed for being unhappy, as if sadness in a sick world is a sign of illness rather than sanity. Jung said, "What you resist persists." We resist the grief men carry. We resist their anger, their longing, their silence. So it grows louder, in addictions, in breakdowns, in explosions. Depression, for many men, is not a malfunction. It's a signal, a soul-deep cry. Wake up. This life is not your own. And the only way out is not into pills or distractions, but into the very heart of the pain, into the shadow. Because hidden in that darkness is the map. A map back to the real self. Jung believed that confronting the shadow was not just therapeutic, it was transformative. A man must face the parts of himself that have been banished, his primal energy, his desire for freedom, his hunger for meaning. Only then can he emerge whole. Only then can depression become direction. So if you're a man and you feel lost, if your life looks fine on the outside but feels empty within, you're not broken, you're being summoned, not to return to the man you used to be, but to become the one you were always meant to become. And that journey starts in the dark. So, if you're a man and you feel lost, if your life looks fine on the outside but feels empty within, you're not broken. You're being summoned, not to return to the man you used to be, but to become the one you were always meant to become, and that journey starts in the dark. But here's the truth they'll never tell you. No one is coming to save you. There is no system, no guru, no perfect plan. There is only you, your willingness to face the silence, your courage to step into the unknown, your hunger for something real. So if this spoke to something deep inside you, don't scroll away. Don't bury it again. Instead, follow it. Leave a comment below. Share what you're waking up to. Subscribe if you're ready to dig deeper. And most importantly, remember, the world doesn't need more men who obey. It needs men who've reclaimed their soul. The time is now. The path is yours. And the first step is facing the truth.